checkbook and she'll say, that's enough, click, and that's a good thing. But as a budget for a county, the county has X amount of dollars of revenue. And there's got to be some priorities. We need some law enforcement. I'm wondering how much we need. We drive into the American Legion for the GOP. I'm GOP endorsed, by the way. We'll pass 6 squad cars on the way from Bass Lake to your 20-minute drive. Now you're up in Minneapolis and Bloomington. And I've never seen a law enforcement presence like I do in Wright County. And there's not gangland like that. I don't see gang graffiti. I don't see a lot of violent crime. And I wonder how much in that budget really needs to be there. Not that I don't like law enforcement, my best friend's a retired cop. But he also gets his Social Security reduced from $1,540 down to $400 a month because he has what they call a windfall pension. So he's well into 6 figures for them to cut his Social Security benefit. That's a big problem where the private sector is getting way less. She lost her 401k. She's lost her pension. Defined benefit pension was taken away 10 years ago. And she's got a control data which is now slated for 30 years. That's what the private sector is doing, but our public sector is not following it well.
As far as the budget is concerned, we have so much money and we give so much to church and we give so much to our savings and our investments that we need to do, and basically we have had to cut our personal spending, so that's what we do. It's kind of homebodies, and you got to pay whatever bills you've got, and that's essentially how we budget. As far as law enforcement, when Social Security was set up, law enforcement, our, police officers and firefighters and ministers were all exempted from the Social Security Act. And that's why they established their, public employee retirement accounts and that kind of thing. And when I worked for Wright County as a corrections officer and a deputy for a short time. When in the mid-90s or so, they wanted to include law enforcement deputies in Social Security, and they all went, no, we want to keep our own private accounts because, they kind of saw the way it was, but that's just my little comment.
I could comment about as far as taxes, when I said to hold the balance on it, if you see your taxes go up 17%, to hold it, that means there's a 17% decrease. From there, I agree that maybe down the road, to answer the previous question, to cut gradually, to answer your question directly with a degree in finance, I ran a business and so on, you need to go back and look at the necessity, you need to look at your expenses, you need to look at your income. You need to do that first, then you need to look at if they don't balance, then you need to go back to either increase your income or you decrease your expenses to balance the budget. So it's very easy for the county to do that, to go back maybe 1 or 2 years and say, what have we spent for the different departments over a 5-year period? What is our income? Right now, the county gets about 40% of their income from homeowners' taxes. The other 60% comes in from grants and other sources. So when you look at where the county is, and with the cutbacks that the state's doing, or if the federal government starts to cut some of their programs, they're going to have less money coming in. And you always want to have a balance in your checkbook or the balance in the county of about 5%. And there's a lot of nonprofits. I work with 2 nonprofits. When they do their budgets, they do their budget with a net zero at the budget. Then if an emergency comes up, now they got to borrow in the middle of the year, or they have to cut in some area that they have told people they can have. To answer your question, you need to look at your expenses over a period of time, your income, where's that income, and how secure is that income. Well, if they're going to raise my taxes 17%, they're going to have more income, but if the government and these grants aren't coming in, the budget may be less than what they anticipated. So you need to start with income expenses, zero it out, and then you need to have about a 5% margin at the end of your budget
Time.
for miscellaneous. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just a comment, on the news tonight, I heard that Scranton, Pennsylvania is in such dire need that their city workers' salaries were lowered to minimum wage, $7.50 an hour, and the man that had worked for the city for 19 years was making $19, and it went down to minimum wage. And that's how desperate, many cities and towns, counties are today.
Oh.
There has to be desperate measures.
Sir.
Are the candidates aware that, Obama's here, that if you're going to sell your home in 2014, there will be an additional 3.5% tax on the sale of the house or the property?
There's like 21 or 2, additional taxes included in Obamacare, and I haven't studied them, but we need to be very afraid.
Yes.
And we need to make sure that he does not get reelected. Because
So this will directly affect the town also. If you have to pay that on the sale of your home, and
you
then
say
you
in
have all
2013 or 2012?
13,
Okay.
that's what it's implemented.
Another reason that he made Obamacare go into effect in 2014, so that we don't see all the impacts of it. There's 900 agencies involved in Obamacare, and by adding a 3% tax, a lot of people are saying it makes more sense to rent. What do you think that does to property values when they're saying that? It's good for the large apartment buildings, they're building apartment buildings everywhere. So they're chasing you out of your single-family home and into apartments or townhouses or multi-family units, and then you're back to Agenda 21, and that is the idea, is to get you out of your independent living in a small home or a big home, whatever you're in. It's going to destroy, it hurts property values. All of this stuff is driving you away from your house.
Dwayne, you want to take a?
To answer your question about that small town defunct, I think that's probably typical if you look at the percentages. That town, I think there's a lot of issues there that some of these small towns have. They may have been very liberal, doing some of the things with retirement, benefits on health insurance. So I think you're going to see more of that. Unfortunately, that's how it goes in society, democratic society. We find that in Buffalo, we find it in Lake County. You overbuild. Nothing's going to happen until we don't have the buyer, and all of a sudden we get the backlash. I think that's happened with some of these towns. Their sewer cost goes up, their water goes up, they have to follow certain guidelines with the federal government, county, and so they don't have the money. Population leaves, they don't have the income coming in, the smaller generation, the younger generation move out for bigger jobs. It's inevitable, it's going to happen. It's going to happen more. That's just part of the democratic society we live in. We don't like it, but it happens with schools. I'm an ex-teacher. Now with enrollments going down, teachers are getting laid off. There's not enough money. It happens with the car industry. You have more and more car manufacturers, automobiles sitting there, and all of a sudden the car dealers leave. Downtown Buffalo, downtown Annandale. You have 3 shops that do the same thing. We don't like the big companies coming in, Target and so on, but you're going to see that. More of it, we don't like it, but it's there, it's poor management. We don't want to be in that position in Lake County with our cities, with our townships, and with commissioners. We need to hold the line so that we don't get in that situation.
Like I said, when we keep talking about cutting budget, I want to know how much of the budget the government shouldn't be doing in the first place.
Let's see, I forgot. How much do you?
That's exactly what the no lake zones are. Monitoring, enforcement. Every time I've sat down and looked at these meetings down there, every time I get in there, there's somebody from one of the departments in there telling us why we need to expand the program. One of the towns, they just got $1.1 million years back for signs. The feds made all the signs that we're using now illegal. So they got $1.1 million, and the little townships have to put it at 20%. Except now today, the guy that's retiring, he's also borrowed from MnDOT. He's retiring and he's telling us that, well, if any of those signs go down, the Fed can do an audit, they can come get their money back, which they've done before. So these little towns are on the hook for making sure that every one of these signs stay within federal guidelines, and it's a federal encroachment. And it doesn't sound like much, but one of the towns has an $11,000 bill right now. If you're a small town with a small budget, that's a lot of money. And every time they get hooked into these federal programs, it's one of the things on my old brochure here is to help make this county more dependent on itself. We need better jobs out here. They're gonna spend money instead of enforcing no wage zones. Let's find some place to get a manufacturer to come in here and give us some decent jobs. But Compton, California, the largest city bankruptcy in the history of the United States, they just filed last week. If you work there for 30 days, you get your medical care paid for life. 30 days. 25% of their budget is pensions. They filed bankruptcy. This is a continuation in all these counties, states, cities. It's going to keep up unless we cut budgets. Not a little, not 1%, but drastically, so Wright County does not end up like Compton, California.
Yep. I'm not privy to, what each budget is for the different departments, but that's something that the commissioners do oversee, the budget of the department. And, it's difficult to say, what would be cut, what I would cut, what I would suggest to be cut. I can't comment on that. I want everything cut across the board,
But you say everything, I don't agree with everything, that's something the government shouldn't be doing. Get rid of it, that's what I'm saying, what percent shouldn't even be there?
yeah, and I completely agree that, our two largest employers in Buffalo, in the city of Buffalo, are the Wright County Government Center and Independent School District 877. Obviously, we need both of those things, but we also need, an industry to help us absorb some of the tax burden that we're all facing. I think, a lot of us here remember when the NSP plant was built in Monticello, and the property taxes for the residents just dropped to almost zero, and of course, the rest of us were all jealous, but of course they came back up again. But we need to have some industry, that would bring people to the county also, and spending money in the county. I know the chamber this last winter, they did a shop Buffalo, and between Thanksgiving and Christmas, the board made a point of spending their money in our community, and they spent like $28,000 in that month. So, there is,
To answer your question, when I mentioned that 40% of the budget that we have income comes from the taxpayer, the other 60%, I think you have to look at that 60%. Where is it coming from, and what can we depend upon, and what's going to be cut? I think that's our job, and when you get the 5 commissioners, if you don't know this, there's about 125,000 people in Lake County. And with the new redistricting, District 1 has about 24,000 people. And when you look at that combination of income that's coming in, you need to look at and say, which programs can we cut? And so the income's got to be there, and I think our job out of the 5 commissioners, there might be 2 incumbents, there'd be 3 new people, and with the job that we're doing, thanks to Tom and the different groups that are meeting and getting the word out, I think we can do the job. The 3 new commissioners are certainly going to work with the 2 incumbents that